The foundation of all great design work is curating a high-quality visual library of design assets and inspirations that you can draw from whenever you need to create a new presentation, brand, website, or application. Follow Picasso's advice. Good artists copy, great artists steal. Try to avoid starting with a blank page. Go see what the top designers are doing. Take loads of screenshots and then remix them into your own work. The internet is an ocean of inspiration, so make the most of it. This is how I manage my visual library. I invest at least a few hours each week doing online research. I have a folder for market research screenshots, a folder for UX product inspiration screenshots, a folder for icons and graphics, a folder for high-resolution photos, and finally a folder for my favorite fonts. For market research, I go digging on Google, Facebook groups, Twitter streams, conference speaker lists, competition award lists, Quora, Angel lists, curated forums, and so on. I don't just search for startups, but also influential people in my target market and see what they are tweeting and following. I make a habit of screenshotting everything, as you never know when a website might change its design. When taking a web page screenshot, I use Command-Shift-4 and include the URL. Then I instantly add it to my market research inbox folder. In some cases, I also paste the URL into an Evernote with a one-liner description of relevant keywords and projects. In my weekly research time, I also browse for great web and mobile interfaces. Sometimes the best product inspirations can be found in an app or website that has nothing to do with your market. The best site for icons and illustrations and logo inspiration for me is Dribbble with 3 Bs. Other websites are the Noun Project, Visually, Pictochart, Canva, Patterns without the A, Unmatched Style, Awards, and Design Bombs. When curating your icons, graphics, and illustrations, I encourage you to stick to minimal designs. Certain types of graphics with flat design are much easier and faster to redraw and remix. I will go into this in more detail later when I cover the basics of using Illustrator and Photoshop. Probably my most useful design folder is the Backgrounds folder, where I save all the high-resolution photos that I find on the web. There is a great website called unsplash.com that lists photos without any IP or copyright restrictions. If you are a bit cheeky like me, you can also use the left-click Inspect Element tool to grab images from other websites too. The best place to download free fonts, in my experience, is fontsquirrel.com. Once you have downloaded your fonts, you need to paste those font files into your computer's font library, and then those fonts will magically appear in all your programs, such as Keynote, Word, Illustrator, and Photoshop. The last point I want to make when it comes to building your visual library is to use the Finder sidebar and also the column view. This will save you loads of time organizing all your screenshots and saving images directly from the web. Ultimately, the goal is to make this process of continuously adding to your visual library an unconscious habit. Right, now on to working with Photoshop and Illustrator. The best way to learn is to start by watching this introductory video all the way through, taking a few notes as you go. Then you can watch it again, this time pausing to complete the following tasks: downloading Illustrator and creating a new document, adjusting your preferences and laying out your workspace, importing and tracing over images like the Fox example, challenging yourself to download a font and use it to create a logo and some business cards, and finally exporting graphics and diagrams using artboards. I have provided a collection of ready-to-go working files and a keyboard shortcut page that you can download and use to get started. Right, let's get started. 5 years ago, I learned how to use Illustrator and Photoshop the hard way, by suffering through hours of painfully tedious Lynda videos that explain every single Adobe feature very slowly and repetitively. Photoshop and Illustrator have literally thousands of features. 90% of those features are either so obvious they don't need to be explained, or they are so specialist that you'll probably never even need to use them. My goal is to show you the stuff that really matters. The first point to cover is the difference between Photoshop and Illustrator. Photoshop is a pixel program, which is great for editing photos. However, if you want to do pretty much anything else, like creating infographics, illustrations, diagrams, and logos, then Illustrator is a much more effective tool. Using Illustrator is a lot like using PowerPoint or Keynote. The key difference is that you have a lot more freedom and flexibility. You can use Illustrator for almost anything: brainstorming, mind mapping, creating video slides, prototyping websites, designing logos, and more. It's pretty powerful. Also, on Illustrator, you have unlimited undos. This is not the case for Photoshop, which is another reason why I recommend you to use Illustrator for the majority of your design work. Right, let's dive into the essential features of Adobe Illustrator. When you open Illustrator for the first time, follow these 2 steps. Step 1. Go to the Illustrator menu bar, select Preferences, and then General. A pop-up will appear. Select Scale Strokes and Effects. This basically means when you make shapes and text bigger on your canvas, the line weight and font size will stay the same. Trust me, this is a real time saver. The next step is to go to the User Interface Preferences and set the brightness to light gray. I find it's much easier for your eyes to be working on a lighter canvas. Step 2 is laying out your workspace. Go to Window and keep selecting the following items: Artboard, Gradient, Pathfinder, Transform, Align, and Levels is kind of optional. Then arrange your workspace like this: Artboards at the top, then Pathfinder, then Align, and finally Gradient on the right hand side. When you are happy with your workspace, go to Window, Workspace, New Workspace to save your workspace layout. You will then be able to access and reload this layout at any time with a single click. Right, now on to drawing and selecting shapes. The V, Black Selection tool, is for selecting and moving shapes and objects. The A, White Selection tool, is for modifying shapes and objects. Use Alt-Z-click to zoom out and Z-click to zoom in. Use spacebar or your touchpad for panning across the canvas. For copying and pasting, just use Command-C, Command-V as normal. You can also hold the Alt key while moving a shape to copy it. You can then use Command-D to repeat the same exact Alt-copy move. When it comes to drawing shapes, you have 3 options. Option 1. You can select the shape tool you want by either going to the left toolbar or by using the keyboard shortcut M for rectangles and L for circles. You can hold Shift for perfect symmetry and use spacebar for moving the entire shape. Option 2. To draw an exact shape, select your shape tool and click once on the empty canvas. You will activate a pop-up box where you can set specific dimensions and properties for your shape. The third and final way to create a shape is by using the P pen tool. This is great for drawing irregular shapes. To create curves within your shape, just click and drag when creating an anchor point. You can also edit all the anchor points you draw with the pen tool by using the A White Selection tool. Every shape you draw is made up of a border called the stroke and an inside area called the fill. You can edit colors and line weight on the top menu bar. You can also select a color by dragging in any photo or image file and using the eyedropper tool. When dragging a photo into Illustrator, make sure you select Embed to save that image within the document. It can also be fun to experiment with Live Trace, which turns your photo into a shape instantly. To get the exact hex code from an object or image, double-click the large color icons on the left toolbar and copy the color code from the pop-up box. To speed up your workflow, you can save any color you have selected as a swatch. This is especially useful when using the gradient tool. There are only a few more things you need to be aware of when it comes to editing and adjusting shapes. The first is the Pathfinder toolbox, which is all about combining shapes to create new shapes. There are two tools that are most useful: join and cut. When you cut multiple shapes, they are automatically grouped. To ungroup them, just press Command-Shift-G on your keyboard. To group them back together, it's just Command-G. Occasionally, you might press Command-Shift-H or Command-H by accident, which switches you to a weird canvas view or selection preference. Just repeat the same keyboard shortcut Command-Shift-H and Command-H to undo that change. Another feature that is explained extensively on lynda.com tutorials is the layer tool. I find it's much more intuitive to forget about layers and just use the old-fashioned click and drag technique to group and move objects around. When you select objects, you can use Command-Shift close bracket to bring those selected objects to the front of the canvas. And then you can use the keyboard shortcut Command-Shift open bracket to send them to the back. It's also worth mentioning the rotate, reflect and align tools. They work pretty much the same way as they do on PowerPoint and Keynote. If you want to cut a shape, you can use the keyboard shortcut C and then click on the border of your shape. To smooth a curve on a shape, select the Smooth tool and just click and drag over your shape. It's that simple. So, now we've covered pretty much all you need to know when it comes to drawing shapes and objects on Illustrator. With the tools that I have just explained, you can create pretty much any illustration you want. Take this fox for example. Drag in the photo, draw some shapes using the pen tool. You can use the Pathfinder tools to save time by cutting and joining the shapes. Then, you can use the eyedropper tool to get your colors right. Okay, so I'm just going to go through how I created this fox image. What I did was I dragged in a photo from my computer like this. Then I embedded that image and started drawing over the top of it. I selected the pen tool and started drawing out the shapes. I would just click and drag to get the curves right. To save time, I would only trace part of each shape, as I could use the Pathfinder Merge and Divide tool to quickly split the shapes. I can just draw one shape, then part of another, and then combine and merge. I created a shape for every color on the image, and then I used the eyedropper tool to give each shape the right color. I can then click and drag to select, go Command-G to group all the shapes together, and then click and drag again, holding the Alt key to copy the image. Right, now on to working with text and creating logos. There are two ways to create text. Select T for the text tool and click on the shape, curve or line you have just drawn. Alternatively, you can just click on any empty space on your canvas and just start typing. It is also worth noting that you can convert text into a shape. Just select your text, go to Object in the menu bar, then select Expand and OK. You can do the same thing with shapes to turn the stroke or border into its own shape. Sometimes you may need to select Expand Appearance first and then expand to get your desired shape. One trick with logos you could try is to visit www.myfonts.com. Type out your brand name and then browse through the options you like. Then when you find something that works, take a screenshot and then draw over that logo with your pen tool. All that is left to show you is how to use artboards, save files, and export images. The keyboard shortcut for artboards is Shift-O. The great advantage of using Illustrator over InDesign and Photoshop is that you have much more flexibility and control. You can literally define the dimensions and ordering of each artboard. However, when creating presentations, I still recommend using Keynote. From Keynote, you can export to PowerPoint. You also have spell check, and you can embed links when you save to PDF. My approach is to create diagrams, logos, and illustrations in Illustrator, and then to copy and paste those images across to Keynote using Command-V, Command-C. When it comes to exporting graphics, to use for printing, or to use in websites and apps, you need to draw out the appropriate artboards. To do this, just draw a shape, go Command-Shift-O, and click on that shape, and bingo, you have an artboard. To export the image or file, just go to File in the menu bar and select Export. Type in the relevant artboard number, select your file type, and press Export. The other advantage to exporting as a .png rather than as a .jpeg is that you can keep the transparency of your image. Just make sure you select the right option when exporting. The last point to make is that unlike Keynote and PowerPoint, Illustrator doesn't auto-save your work. So make sure you regularly save your Illustrator files. And one more quick tip. If you ever want to compress your PDF file size, you can go to a nifty website called www.smallpdf.com. Right, now on to Photoshop. Just like Illustrator, Photoshop is a monster program with thousands of features. This might seem overwhelming at first, but if you know how to use the essential features, it's actually pretty intuitive. What I mainly use Photoshop for is adjusting image sizes to use for apps and websites. I create and export all the images in Illustrator without bothering about getting the scale perfect. Then I drag the exported graphics into Photoshop. Then I press Command-Alt-I to adjust the dimensions of the image. Once the dimensions are adjusted, I then use the Save shortcut Command-S to save the image. Just in case you are interested, you can use the shortcut Command-Alt-C in Photoshop to edit the canvas size. Another way I use Photoshop is to create GIFs, which are animated images that behave like animations. To create a GIF animated image, select Window and Timeline. Then just play around and remember, when saving your work, make sure you save for web as a .gif file. The other useful tools and features to be aware of in Photoshop are layers, layer masks, merging layers, using filters, the brush tool, and the transform functions. Just like with Illustrator, you also want to create an efficient workspace layout. Basically, you want to have layers and history on the right, and then your tools on the left. If you want to become a power user of Illustrator and Photoshop, then think about investing into a bamboo tablet. With one hand on the keyboard and the other holding your bamboo pen, your Illustrator and Photoshop speed will be immense. Another key point to make is that there are loads of YouTube videos explaining different Illustrator and Photoshop functions. You can also check out the Adobe forums. Just go to www.forums.adobe.com. Now that you have a good sense of how to work with Illustrator and Photoshop, we can move on to how to create business cards, logos, and presentations. When designing logos, the secret is to pick a high-quality font and then to combine it with a minimal icon. If you have a two-word brand, a simple approach is to make one bold and the other one light, just like with Give Vision. Here are some of my favorite fonts that I use for logos and presentation text: Montreal, Bryant, Lee Gothic, Century Gothic, Helvetica, and occasionally Lobster. The best places to find free fonts to download are fontsquirrel.com, dafont.com, and google.com/fonts. When it comes to exporting your design files and printing your business cards, beware of the difference between CMYK and RGB formats. CMYK is for printing and RGB is for online screen viewing. Also, to ensure a high print quality, save your design as a vector-based PDF or PNG. Saving in JPEG may result in fuzziness around the edges of your text. One thing I like to do with my business cards is to design a flip, where you have a strong color on one side and a light color with your contact details on the other. When it comes to creating presentations, context is everything. Start by thinking about the format of your presentation. Will it be for reading on screen, or for reading in print. Perhaps you will be presenting in person. It is also crucial to consider the audience. Ask yourself these 3 questions. Who is your target user and what are their needs? What impact or action are you looking for the user to take? What design style would feel familiar and appealing to your user? Here's another design hack. When pitching for client work, tailor your presentations as much as possible to them and their brand. Add their logo to the first and second slide. Make it look and feel bespoke. And don't try and say everything. Focus on the essential points that will draw your client into a further discussion. For screen-based presentations that you email to clients, I prefer to work with a widescreen template. Try to lay out your pages or your slides as if you are having a conversation. Make one point at a time, calmly and clearly. Don't squash your design to fit more stuff in. Just start a new page. Use lots of padding and make sure all images and text boxes are in alignment. There is a great quote that goes, "A designer knows he has achieved perfection not when there is nothing left to add, but when there is nothing left to take away." Right, now on to diagrams. One of the most valuable skills I have acquired over the years is the ability to visualize complexity, to turn the abstract into the tangible. I do this through diagrams. The goal of every diagram I create is to give order and hierarchy to complex information. Diagrams enable us to show what would otherwise take us many pages to explain in text. My consulting process works a bit like this. I have a meeting, and then I ask as many questions as possible. I try to gain a holistic and deep understanding of the client's problems and business. Then I type up my notes and start mind mapping and clustering the keywords. This quickly turns into a collection of diagrams that I can use to explain a new strategy. I usually start with the big picture and then move down into the details to identify the most relevant and essential action to take. I have added lots of template files to the shared folder to use as examples. Just go ahead, download those files, and start playing around. Right, now on to building websites and prototyping your apps. Coding is a great skill, and if it's something that interests you, go for it. However, it is important to break the myth that in order to make stuff online, you need to be able to write your own code. This is just not the case. In fact, building websites today is as simple as creating a presentation on Keynote. It is important to distinguish between digital literacy and hardcore programming. Everyone can get good at digital. The secret is having the persistence to keep clicking until you find your answer. Just dive in, and through trial and error, you will eventually figure out how to build the website you want. Today, it is possible to build your MVP without writing a single line of code. You just need to be creative with all the cloud-based tools that are out there. When it comes to designing and building websites, I like to break it down into 3 phases. Phase 1 is the idea stage. You just need to register a domain, set up email forwarding, create a simple 1-page website with a mailing list call to action, and in case someone wants to contact you directly, just add your email to the web page. Keep your web presence as minimal as possible at this stage. There is a hack called framed web forwarding, which allows you to override any URL with your preferred domain. This way, you can have a custom URL website without upgrading to any premium subscriptions. My favorite web builder tool is Wix. It gives me more design control compared to Squarespace and Weebly. I find it much more intuitive. However, their templates for designing websites are not very good. I would recommend starting from scratch and building your own theme. Also, regularly test how your website looks and feels on both mobile and web. Pay attention to the details. My advice would be to never stop being on the lookout for new tools. Stay flexible and be creative. Here is a list of tools worth exploring and seeing how you can remix into the MVP that you want. Right, now moving on to stage 2, first revenue. As the name suggests, the priority at this stage is not to design the perfect website, but to validate your business model and get to first revenue. This is the time to upgrade your web builder to premium, connect with Google Analytics, and really start measuring the traffic you're getting. A good way to improve your SEO and drive more traffic to your website is to publish lots of medium.com articles that link back to your website several times. Then promote these pages regularly on social media. You will get a stream of high-quality traffic without having to spend anything on advertising. Now, moving on to how I approach my web design projects. I start by mapping out all the different stakeholders and design a sales page and a type form for each. My strategy is to focus the home page on communicating the vision and purpose, and then to draw different stakeholders into other pages with clear call to actions. I avoid direct selling. Instead, I focus on starting a conversation, which can then lead to a call or an email exchange. During this one-to-one communication, I take the time to really listen to how the potential client describes their challenge or pain point. When you provide a great customer service, you usually end up with not only a sale, but an evangelist for your business. My final point is that you don't need to hire a tech team and build a platform or application until you are overwhelmed with paying clients. Get your processes right, and then build the tech to automate those processes. You don't need to rush into creating an e-commerce site, a job board, or a social network. You need to focus on the relationship with your customer. Let's show you an example. Mr. X is the founder of Business X, an early-stage venture looking to make secondary school education more relevant, fun, and social. He wants to create a scalable way to connect young teenagers to the best brains from across the world. He starts by spending £30,000 building a tutoring platform using an outsourced development team in Bangladesh. Then, after seeing the potential of Wix, Typeform, and other social media tools, he decided to switch. Learn from this lesson. Don't waste £30,000 building tech you don't need. I now want to mention a few things with respect to branding. Please watch Simon Sinek's Start With Why TED Talk and also Steve Jobs' talk on the importance of values in marketing. The best place from which to build a brand narrative is through exploring your own values and purpose. Remember that you are not selling your product, but the impact that your product will have on the world. Sell the why, not the what. Also, trust your instincts. Create a brand that you and your team will love and believe in. Don't let user research and groupthink push you towards a brand that you do not love. The most effective brands were born out of the personalities of their founders. Pick something that resonates with you and your values. If you don't get excited by the name, no one else will. And just like I mentioned before, don't start with a blank page. Curate a mood board of inspirations that capture elements of the brand experience you want to create. Research your nearest competitors. Browse your visual library. The more context you have, the easier it will be to create high-quality brands fast. Okay, now on to the final stage, scalability. This is the moment when you decide to finally build your own in-house platform or application. At this point, you should be clear on exactly what you want to build and have a validated business model. The best place to start is to list all the different web pages your application will have. Then design and wireframe those pages using Illustrator and upload those screenshots into a prototyping app like envisionapp.com. You could also use Wix for this. I have added some example files to the shared drive to show you what I mean. Once you have collected the necessary feedback from your live prototype, you can start building your tech team. My advice here is to find a part-time CTO or technical advisor who can help you design the platform architecture and hire the right technical team. Also, if you have a fully visualized app, you can be much clearer on what needs to be built. Make sure you also communicate the long-term product vision so that your developers can build a scalable application. At this stage, you really want to launch something that can scale. The final part of this introductory video is focused on how to do lean slideshow animations. Video content is beginning to dominate the internet. Research shows that 74% of all internet traffic in 2017 will be video. However, creating high-quality professional videos can be time-consuming and expensive. This module is all about showing you how to create professional and engaging videos quickly and cheaply. I have perfected this process over many years. So let's start with the tools. You need to have a Mac with iMovie, GarageBand and QuickTime installed. You need to buy a high-quality microphone. I use the Blue Snowball microphone, which is the microphone that most of the leading video bloggers recommend. And finally, you need to have basic knowledge of how to use Adobe Illustrator. If you don't know how to use Illustrator, please watch my design hacking video that will show you how to use Illustrator in less than 20 minutes. The most frustrating part of making videos is the filming process. You need to get the lighting right, you need to record a separate audio, and if you want to change the script, you need to redo the entire video. My solution is to avoid using film and instead create a slideshow animation. Start by writing out your script. Make sure you get feedback for your script and wait a few days before recording. It's amazing how much time is wasted going back and re-recording audio because you rushed into production mode. Get the script right and then make the audio recording using GarageBand. I like to have my script visible in a large font on my iPad. I use the teleprompter iPhone app by Joe Allen. When I make a mistake, like mispronouncing a word, I just press pause and start recording from the moment I make the mistake. With this approach, you can have your audio done and polished in no time. Then the next step is to highlight keywords and phrases in your script. These keywords will be used to create your Illustrator slides. I usually start by designing a template like this one, and then I add the relevant icons, keywords, and phrases to each slide. When creating educational videos, I try to include text as well as images. Seeing and hearing a word at the same time makes it easier to remember. I also try and change colors, once again to grab people's attention. Often I go to dribbble.com with 3 Bs to find appropriate icons. I take a screenshot and then I add the icons to my slides. I then export all the slides as .png files and then drag them into iMovie. I add transitions between the slides to create the animation effect. I make sure that the slides match up with the audio and then I export and save the video. I also sometimes combine the slides with live film footage and screen recordings. QuickTime is best for screen recordings, and Ecamm Recorder is a great tool for recording your Skype calls.